We're on Shabbat Perek Aleph, Mishnah Gimel, third Mishnah in the first chapter of Shabbat. And as we said before, we're learning from the last Mishnah things that a person shouldn't do lest it bring him to something else. Now actually this is a very interesting halacha about Hilchot Shabbat, because so much of Hilchot Shabbat is Shema. The Chachamim made a gzeira in order to prevent somebody from doing something else. So this is a very interesting introduction to Masechet Shabbat in general. Says the Mishnah, Lo yetzeh chayat b'machto. Chayat is the tailor with his machat. His machat is his needle. And so he would take the needle, I have a pen, but he would take the needle and he would walk around. I don't have a good example here. Okay, I don't have a needle with me, but he would walk, I think I just broke my pen too. Okay, he would walk around and the needle would be like stuck in his shirt somewhere. Because whenever he would, if he ever came upon a tailoring emergency, he would just whip out his needle and fix the garment. So that's how he'd walk out. So the Mishnah says he shouldn't walk out b'machto samuch l'chashecha. Actually, I need to correct myself. Okay, the Bartanura says afilu tchuva lo b'bigdo. Even if it's tchuva, if it's stuck into his garment, shema yishkach v'yetzei. Maybe he'll go out and yetzei, he'll forget and walk out with it on Shabbat. Okay, and if he forgets and walks out, the problem is like this. If I'm walking and I have a needle in my baguette, is that carrying me d'oraita or midrabanan? What's the difference? If it's carrying me d'oraita, that's why the Chachamim would make a gzeira of lo yetzei chayat b'machto. Since it's asur d'oraita, therefore you make a gzeira. But according to some opinions, you shouldn't. It's only a d'rabanan. It's a shinoi, I'm not carrying it in my hand. It's stuck in my garment. I'm kind of wearing it. So even though I'm really carrying it, it's not. Is that wearing it for us as an isur? So it turns out that's actually a machloket in the Tosefta. The Tosefta quotes this brighta and says the following. Gives these examples. Lo yetzeh chayat b'machto. Let me make the text a little bigger. Here we go. Okay. Lo yetzeh chayat b'machto. Erev Shabbat samuch l'chashecha. That's our example. The tailor shouldn't go with his machat. Shema yishkach v'yetzeh. Maybe he'll forget and go out. Similar is true of the Nagai, the carpenter, Kesam Shabbatzavaro. The carpenters always wore, I guess, around their necks, Kesam or wood chips. Velo tzava b'dugma sheba'ozno. And the color guy, the guy who was the dyer, D-Y-E-R, he had always his samples. Velo shulchani b'dinar sheba'ozno. For some reason, the money change guy always had a coin in the back of his ear. Velo sorek. Sorek was a surveyor. He kept a surveying rope around his neck. Yatsu kulam, but if they all walked out, turim. If they walked out on Shabbat, they're patur, divrei Rabbi Meir. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion. Why? Because Rabbi Meir felt that he's an he's not carrying. Rabbi Yehuda says, uman derech umanuto chayav. If it's a tradesman and he's carrying it in the way that the tradesman carries, so if he's the lavlar, if he's the tailor, and he's got the needle stuck in, the way is his umanot, chayav. He is chayav, the oraita. That's an issue, the oraita. So, and therefore, what's the pshat in our Mishnah? It depends. If you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, like the Rambam does, like Rabbi Meir, like the Rambam does, that says patur, why would you have this gzeira? So the Rambam says it must be talking about the chayat b'machto in his hand. On the other hand, the Bartanura says, Uman derech umanato chayav. Rabbi Bartanura passes like Rabbi Yehuda, okay, who says that in this case it would be chayav. So therefore, he explains that the Mishnah is talking about afilu tchuva lo bebigdo. Even if he's carrying it in his beged, in his garment, he's not carrying it the normal way. For him, it's an issur d'oraita. Because for him, it's an issur d'oraita, therefore Chazal made a gzeira and said that before Shabbat, samuch l'chashecha, when it becomes dark, he's not allowed to walk out. He has to check and make sure that his normal pin, the needle in his garment is not stuck in the garment. Shema yishkach v'yetzei. Similarly, v'lo av lavlar. Lavlar is the sofer. Sofer is the scribe. In those days, that was the lawyer, the guy who wrote the contracts. B'kul muso, with his pen. He would walk around with the kulmus in his ear. It's interesting that example does not appear in the Tosefta. V'lo yafle et kelav. New example. New halacha. V'lo yafle et kelav. Lafle means, the Bartanura says, mevaer kinim bibgadav. I.e., you're going to pick nits. Pick kinim is lice out of your clothes. Why you need it very careful. You need light for that. V'lo yikra lo or haner. Nor on Shabbat, the Mishnah says, are you allowed to read by candlelight? This might be a surprise. It's a din in the Mishnah. You cannot read by candlelight. Why? In a light. Shema yateh haner la'avi hashemin. Maybe you'll tilt the ner. Remember, when we say ner, we're not talking about the candle like we have. Their ner. There was a lamp that held oil in a wick. See if I can find an example. Yeah, that wasn't very hard. Ancient oil lamp. Here you go. It had oil, and it had a wick in it. And the oil, so this is even a better example, right? This is the wick and the oil, the lamps. I don't know if you ever try to light Hanukkah lamps. It works sometimes well, and sometimes it doesn't work at all. So the oil, they would tilt it. They would try to get better light. It was your natural inclination when you're reading for the lamp. Okay, so therefore, lo yikra le'or haner shema yater taner lefi haptila kadesh lidlok lefeh v'nimtza ma'avir b'Shabbat. That act of tilting the lamp in order to make it light better, that's mavir. That's an isur d'oraita. So again, we make gzeira in order to prevent people from inadvertently violating an isur d'oraita. Back to the Mishnah. So you can't. Be'emet amru, but be'emet amru, truth they said, hachazan ro'eh hechanatina kot korim. If the chazan means I'm the teacher, and so the kinderlach come in, the kids come in, and they're reading from the Sefer Torah on Shabbat night. It's an early Shabbat, so they're reading by the light. Okay, they're allowed to read. Why? Because it's part of the Parshanim explained, because they have a shomer. The chazan is watching them, so they're not going to touch the light. Aval hu lo yikra, but he himself can't read. Why can't he read? Why? Mipnei she'ein ematan alav. They're not afraid. There's nobody guarding him. Ushmiratam lo avi shmira. So therefore, if somebody has a shomer, you say, listen, watch me, I'm going to read. If you have a shomer, that's the halacha. If you have a shomer, you're fine. But if you don't have a shomer, then you're not allowed to read by the light of candles, by the light of the lamp, according to the din of the Mishnah, unless you have some system in place in order to prevent you from violating an isur d'oraita. Kiyotzebo. Oh, by the way, I just want to point out be'emet amru. Some say it's a halacha Moshe Misina, and some say it's just a Mesorah. We know that that's the din. Kiyotzebo. Similarly, lo yochal azab e mizava. If a man is a zav, or his wife is a zavah, so therefore it's asur mid'oraita for them to live together as husband and wife. So therefore they have to do what's called harchakot. We have harchakot that we have today. We don't eat together at the same table, or you have a thing of salt on the table, or you ate separate placemats. Why? Because of the hergel, you're going to be accustomed to sinfulness. If you eat together in an intimate way, that will lead you to avera. So these are all the Chazal saw. This is the same thing. We are trying to prevent people from doing things that will lead to hergel avera, that will lead to automatic, inadvertent commission of sin. I just want to bring down, I saw Rabbi Melamed. Rabbi Melamed writes about this halacha. He brings down this halacha of gzeirat hachachamim shelo likra or haner. He brings it down. And there is a gzeira, okay, if you're reading to an or haner. He says, nowadays in our lights, our paraffin lamps, if you're reading by candlelight on Shabbat, he says, I don't think it's a problem. Why? Because a paraffin light, dolei ketev. But we don't touch our lights. So that's what the Mishnah writes, that in the modern times, our modern candles light very well. He says, for sure, that's definitely true. You're definitely allowed to read by the light of a norach chashmalit, an electric lamp, and because nobody touches those at all. Even if you could turn it up or turn it down, or it even has a dimmer, we're not afraid that people will do that because you can see it's fine. He has something very interesting, though. Makom lechatchila, tov lahaniach b'mikra kazeh al meteg hanora petek. You should leave a note on your switch, shekatuv alav Shabbat, that says on it Shabbat, kadesh lo yavo b'taot lahagbirat ta'or, because maybe so you won't by mistakenly turn up the light, especially if you have a dimmer, especially if you have a light that has a switch that you can turn to different settings. You should be careful. It's an interesting thing. It's an interesting note. Nowadays, I would say that even nowadays, that especially that we have LEDs that are derabanan, or fluorescent lights in Israel, that all the lights are fluorescent, so it's certainly derabanan. It definitely you're allowed to read or haner. We're going to stop here. It's just interesting to point out that, they didn't have books. So nobody had ready books, especially in the time of the Mishnah. But even then, even if they had candlelight, the candlelight was on the table so that they could see the meal, but they were not allowed to read by the candlelight, and the light was so fragile in and of itself. Just an interesting understanding of the way that they lived back then. We'll stop here. Comments or questions, rspolter@gmail.com. We'll dedicate the learning of this Mishnah to the memory of my father, Rav Simcha ben Yitzchak Halman. Have a great day.